So, a few things I want to say about the general regression model, just to make sure we're clear on some things, is that number one, you do not need all three of these to be heightened in order for the general regression model to continue on to the appraisal processes. All right, so you just need one. So, for example, research has shown that exposure to media violence, for example, that operates mostly through priming. So if the video game you watch or play is here, that's going to lead to mostly the cognitive route, and that is what makes this go down, and the rest of the general regression model to proceed accordingly. So so that's the first thing, is that you don't need all three of the present internal state to be active, if you will. You just need one. Obviously, if you have all three active, that's going to be a little different than if you just have one active in terms of your level of aggressive responding afterwards. But needless to say, you don't need all three. The second thing I want to say is that in the lab, this is incredibly easy to manipulate. So if you manipulate something, that's going to be the situation. And what we do as researchers, in terms of the personality, we either measure like trait aggression or sex of participant or whatever, or what we do is we just say random assignment, right? And so if you're just like, oh, well, the media violence effect, that's going to be your situation, sure, but what about males should be more affected than females? And sure, if you measure it, you can test it, but other than that, I'm just like random assignment. And so it's easy to manipulate. It's easy to do in the lab because all you have to do is manipulate this, measure one of these, if not all three, and then measure your behavior here. Rarely do researchers measure down here. When I was, I worked for Craig Anderson, this guy here, in graduate school, and he helped me develop some ideas that really tested the appraisal process. So I've started to kind of work in this area down here, a relatively understudied area. But in all honesty, all we have to do is manipulate the situation, maybe measure the internal state, check, and then after that measure some behavior like the CRT or the hot sauce paradigm or something. And that's one cycle, all right? Now, what's cool about the general regression model is, remember, this is the proximate model. So this is the situation that you have right in front of you right now. That's what this is here, all right? And this is how you feel right now. This is your priming right now. This is how aroused you feel right now. And this right here is how you're going to behave right now. Now, this is what's called a learning-based cycle, all right? So in reality, what's likely to happen is you are going to run to a case where every time you run through one cycle of this, like that, every time you run through one cycle, that is what is called a learning trial. So let's say you're a kid, like 9 years old, and let's say someone steals your toy. Well, that's a provocation. That's a situational variable. That's a provocation. And let's say that you get angry, and that anger makes you want to lash out and, let's say, hit the kid who took your toy. That is one learning trial. And if no one is there if no one is there to punish you for that, right? If no one says, no, hitting's bad, don't do that. If no one is there to punish you for that, then what's going to happen is that's going to be you're going to learn a pairing, and the pairing is going to be between the situation, you were provoked, and this behavior, you punched him. And you're going to learn that if you're not negatively reinforced for that, then that's what you learn. So it's a learning trial. And what's going to happen is the next time you're in that situation, someone takes your toy, the next time you're in that situation, you're going to remember the last time you did that, you punched someone and it felt good, you got your toy back and no one got you in trouble. Guess what? You're probably going to do it again. And you know what that's called? A behavioral script, just like we talked about for exam 1. So what's going to happen is, even though this is what's called the proximate model, meaning right now, what's going to happen is you're going to learn. And that learning is going to cause something called the distal model. So this is the distal. Distal means over time, so like long periods of time. And it's going to start with this learning, the learning we just talked about. Every single cycle of this proximate GAM is a learning trial. And what's going to happen is that's going to lead to a lot of things that you already know about. We've already defined schemas as mental representations of things, scripts as mental representations of events, attitudes as a positive or negative evaluation of something, and then this term, desensitization. All right, desensitization is really the only new term we have here, and that's going to be defined as desensitization is defined as the lessening of an emotional reaction to some stimulus. Right? So in the aggression world, really what we mean is like the first time you punch someone in the face, you're going to see blood. Right? Let's say you break someone's nose, you're going to see blood and grossness and gross. The first time you see that, you're going to be like, oh my God, I can't believe I did that. It's so gross and bloody and I don't want to look at it. And oh my gosh, I'm a terrible person. But then let's say the next time you break someone's nose, you're going to be like, oh, it's just a little blood. And by the 10th time you break someone's nose, you're just like, who cares? That's what desensitization is, where you have a lessening of emotional reaction to that. All right? So we have scripts, schemas, and attitudes. And those are specific to aggressive scripts, schemas, and attitudes. So over time, in the proximate model, someone takes your toy and you punch them. That's a learning trial. You do that a lot. That's this learning up here. And what's going to happen is you're going to form aggressive attitudes. It's okay to punch people. That's what you're going to say. Desensitization. That's going to be where you are just like, oh, I punched someone. Who cares? They'll get up. Aggressive scripts are like, and schemas are going to be like, if we're in that situation again, what's going to happen? And scripts are going to be what we evaluate. Remember, it's one of the steps in predicting behavior. And schemas are going to be how the priming thing starts, how easily it is to prime you with aggression. All right? And so that's how this works. So what, I often get asked, what do we need to know for the test on this type of thing? You need to know what these 4 things are and how we're going to define them. Right? You already know scripts, schemas, and attitudes from the previous tests. Desensitization is the only new one, but just do know that this only relates to aggression. Now, what's going to happen is the more you have those 4 things, that's going to lead to your aggressive personality. It's going to make you an aggressive person. All right? Now, if we go back to, so let's back up. So aggressive personality. I consider myself, sadly, to be a very aggressive person. And I've never been in a fist fight in my entire life. All right? But what's going to happen is, if someone says something, let's take a driver. Like, I'm apparently easily provoked by drivers. If someone cuts me off while I'm driving, I have such a long history of, media violence exposure and all these things that what's going to happen is I am quick to anger. I'm quick to want to retaliate if someone cuts me off while I'm driving. And those are things that are right here. And I will often think it's acceptable to cut someone, or if someone cuts me off, to like give them the finger. That's an aggressive attitude, or yell at them. And then finally, the longer this goes on, the more I do it. And so I consider myself to be an aggressive person. All right. Now, what's cool about this is the general aggression model links. All right. So we have a distal piece right here, but we also have a proximate piece, the piece I just showed you. And if you look, what you'll see is the first place this links is going to be here at the person. Your aggressive personality that gets formed as a result of these pictures here, that is you. That is your personality. That's what you bring to the lab. And so that's going to fit right there. All right. The second place that this comes is, it's not drawn on here, but it's going to be the learning. So every time you do a social encounter, all right, every time you go through one cycle of this, you end here, so I guess I shouldn't circle that. Every time you go through one cycle and you behave a certain way, that's a learning trial. And guess where learning fits in? All the way at the top where it says learning. And learning spawns those 5 things, and those 5 things, or 4 things, sorry, and these 4 things spawn the person. The learning of those 4 things, by the way, that's right here. This is the continued learning with the proximate model. All right? So there's 2 places where the GAM is linked up. One is going to be the person, as it's circled here, and the other is going to be the learning that occurs. So it's a cyclical model. All right, and that's what makes the general aggression model really cool. It's circular, and it builds on each other. The situation predicts your personality through the learning, and how you are as a person predicts how you interpret and respond to the situation at the beginning of this. So it all kind of goes around in a big circle. Right? Now, for the rest of this topic, what we're going to do is we're going to build this thing. I'm going to show you how theory gets built. And by doing so, we're going to talk about some really cool studies that were in there. So the first is, let's talk about how this all came about. All right. So the first, what Anderson and Bushman did is they were looking at other theories that came before them, because you have to start somewhere. And the first is what he called the instinctual theories. All right, it's a group by like Freud and Lorenz and all them. And what they basically said is that anger or aggression is like this built-up, tense thing that needs to be released, and that's called catharsis. When you release this energy into the world. So the idea here is that if you're really angry, you punch a pillow, and then that releases all of your aggressive energy. So that way you don't punch like your wife or your kids or your husband or whatever. That's what they suggested. All right. Now, what's interesting is that you don't see these words anywhere in the GAM. So what they wanted to do was test it. So here's what Bushman did. All right. First, this is Bushman in the year 2002. What he did is he provoked participants. All participants wrote an essay that was supposed to be graded by their partner. I've used this manipulation a lot. It works really well. Basically, you write an essay about abortion, something that's important to you. And then what happens, and there's clear sides to it, and then what happens is your partner, quote unquote, grades it. And they grade it harshly. They say it's not creative, it's not good, and then they physically write in a pen one of the worst essays I've ever read. And I've used this before, and it works wonders. All right. Then participants are randomly assigned to 3 groups. The first group was the control group, where they were just told, I need to leave real quick, sit quietly for 2 minutes, I'll be right back. All right. The second group was called distraction and punching. So for this group, basically there was a speed punching bag. And the participant was told that I want you to, participant was instructed to punch this punching bag as much as you want for 2 minutes. But while you're doing it, they want you to think of getting physically fit, like you're exercising. And this was called distraction, all right? Distraction, because what you're doing is you're distracting the participant from the provocation. You're having him ignore it. And then finally, the third condition was rumination. And they were told to punch this punching bag, just like the other group was, but pretend that the partner's face was this punching bag. Pretend that the grader of your essay who insulted you is the puncher. Now, if catharsis works, what should happen? I want you guys to think about that. Pause this, think about it, whatever. But the question is, if catharsis works, who should be the least aggressive and who should be the most aggressive? And if this theory works, what you should see is that these people should be the most aggressive. They have this pent-up anger that they can't get rid of. Both of these people, but especially this one, should be the least aggressive because they got to release that energy. Well, guess what? These are the means. So after they did the punching, they got to play the CRT, so the competitive reaction time task. And the higher the score, the more aggressive you are. Right? What they see is there's a significant difference between this group and this group. And look at those means. Right? Don't worry about, I'm not going to test you on the number, but just know the pattern. That the control group was actually the least aggressive. And the rumination and punching group was actually the most aggressive. So in other words, punching a pillow actually doesn't save you from being aggressive. It makes you more aggressive. All right? This is interesting. In Denmark, apparently, at daycare centers, they have a thing where they have this room of just pillows. And if you and another peer are mad at each other, you just go to this pillow room and fight it out, quote unquote. And I heard someone talk about this, and it was in the context of Denmark's the greatest place ever to raise kids. And they said that in these daycare centers, they had this thing. And I almost wanted to raise my hand and be like, that doesn't work, right? Because clearly catharsis doesn't work that way. If you punch someone with a pillow or you hit him with a pillow, that's not going to decrease your likelihood of future aggression. It's going to increase it. Look at that number. That's a positive number, and those letters next to it mean it's significantly different from this group here. That's why you see the A here and the B there. All right? So actually just having someone sit and take some time, that is what's known to reduce aggression. And that's why you see that smaller in the control group. Blah, blah, blah. Long story short, catharsis is not in the GAM because it doesn't work.